How do we hold software developers to be more accountable for their work, and how do we get them to take more ownership? These are critical for improving the velocity of how much your team gets done and increasing the quality of their work. That's what we're going to talk about today on Product Driven. To survive and thrive, you must adopt a product-driven mindset. And we're back for another episode of Product Driven. This is your host, Matt Watson. Today I'm joined by Schmidt, who's a CTO coach, also author of the book Amazing CTO. If you're an engineering manager, CTO, definitely check out Steven and his book. Today we're going to be talking about holding software developers accountable. Steven, is that even possible? How do we do this?
So first, thanks for having me. Second, yes, I think it's doable, but it's sometimes quite tough.
Well, I think in our planning of this episode, there's a couple of key things we talked about. And the first one is trying to hold developers accountable for timelines, which is very frustrating. But I think also holding them accountable for just owning whatever it is that they're doing. And this is a big thing at Full Scale that we really preach with all of our developers is we want them to have ownership of whatever it is they're working on. They need to care about it. They need to drive what it is that they're doing. And maybe we should start there. Like, how do you get people to have ownership of things?
I'd say biggest rule, don't take it away. Like some people might have ownership or feel ownership for some things, and then the manager takes it away. Usually by parachuting in, if there is a problem or something takes a little bit too long or something, then the manager goes in and looks at it and tries to micromanage it and tries to get it started again. And ownership is just like a soap bubble. It's flying around and then you touch it and it makes bloop, and it bursts. And that's how managers act with this, that they parachute in, they try to fix something, but then the ownership bubble just bursts and people are not feeling they own things anymore.
Well, and this is kind of a complicated subject because, as you just described, it's one thing for the managers to give ownership to somebody and actually do good at that and let them make decisions, let them fail, let them try and drive whatever it is, right? And as you described, they may do that, but then they take it away if they don't like how it's being done or if it's not being done fast enough or they don't like how they're doing it or whatever. And so I think that's one part of it. And I think the other thing to think about in regards to that, if you're the manager, is you have to look for teachable moments where you could help them improve, right? Not ruin those teachable moments and you go run off and do them, right? Yeah. Like the only way that these people are going to learn these things, just like if your kid's learning to walk, like you don't run over every time they're about to fall. Like you let them fall and learn like how to do this, right? Like you've got to have those teachable moments. Yeah. Does that make sense?
Totally. And it's a constant effort over long periods of time. It's not one thing to give someone ownership. It's all the small things. First, give people ownership by say that's the thing you own. Have it in the role description, what they own. Say role description says owns, and then there's 3 bullet points which a person or the role owns. Start there, but then also tell people in the one-on-one, this is what you own. You own the thing. You own this project. I'm a simple guy. I'm using this language. Sometimes people use complicated language. If you want people to own something, say so and say this is what you own.
Well, so along those lines, though, let's say you have a developer and you're like, hey, you own building this UI or whatever it is. How do you then hold them accountable for that? Like what is the cadence of reaching out to them and saying, hey, do you need help? Expectations of how they communicate, collaborate. It's like, oh, I gave you ownership of this thing and I haven't heard from you in 2 weeks. It's probably not good, right? Like how do you do without micromanaging them, without taking ownership away from them, right? Like what is the right balance of like, hey, I gave you ownership. Here's the expectation of what that means. Like here's how we communicate and collaborate.
Yeah. Very good point. When I was a CTO, or an engineering manager, I told everyone during onboarding, especially juniors, but everyone, there is a right point in time when to ask for help or when to ask for direction. And if I give you something to work on, and you come back 5 minutes later, that's too early. But if you come in 5 days and you're stuck for 5 days, and I think you're working along, but you're stuck for 5 days, and you come to me, that's too long. So somewhere in between is the right point to ask for help. And I feel a lot of people make the mistake, either they take too long or they come too quick to me. So making them aware of the fact that there is a right point in time. So that's one thing. The second is a mistake I made as a manager for a long time is I treated people the way I wanted to be treated, which is totally wrong, obviously, as a manager, because you need to treat people the way they need to be treated.
Right.
So with a junior, I would check in every day. With a senior, best I would never check in. Like the ideal solution to me, or the ideal situation to me would be, I never check in. You do this, done. And if there is a problem, you come to me. But if there is no problem, you own it. You do your thing. I don't need to check.
It all comes down to trust in your working relationship with them.
Yes, trust is a very important word. A lot of companies do not have enough trust. That's kind of a lubricant. Trust is kind of a lubricant that makes everything go. Yeah.
So my 10-year-old at his elementary school, there's a sign on the wall, and I think it says, if you haven't tried to fix it 3 times yourself, don't ask me for help.
Yes.
Right. There's some kind of rule like this that has to exist.
Yes.
When I was in college, the college professor referred to it as the toasters. It's like, we're all in the computer lab. We're all doing computer science like classes. He's like, every single time you have an issue, if you pop out of your chair and run over here like a toaster, like that's not good. Like stay in your chair and work on the problem. You can't be popping up every 5 minutes.
Yeah. And that's exactly how about ownership and depending on the level. Treat the people depending on what they need instead of what you think is right treating you.
So we also talked earlier before we started recording about how important motivation was, and you had a great formula for that. Tell me about your motivation formula.
So motivation ties into accountability. It's very hard to hold people accountable if they are not motivated. I also feel it's not fair if they are not really motivated, and then it's obvious you don't do the things I tell you to do, or you say you're going to do if you're not motivated. So I need to fix motivation first. And for me, developer motivation is joy plus discipline minus frustration. So the level of motivation is the level of joy plus the level of discipline you have minus the level of frustration you currently have. And which means joy is you enjoy the task. If you really enjoy the task, enjoy coding, enjoy something you're doing, you seem motivated. From looking at you, I feel, oh, that person is motivated. And sometimes you don't have the joy, but then you need to be able to pull the discipline to a level that you just keep doing the stuff you don't like to do. Like discipline, if you don't have joy, you need to have discipline to do the things you do not like to do. And if this is high, from my point of view as a manager, you also look motivated. I don't know if it's joy or discipline you're doing that, but you're doing this without me telling you constantly to do this. So to increase motivation of developers, you need to help them get more joyous tasks, keep a little bit the boring stuff out, but also help them enjoy things, but also tell them, and that's something I, like since decades, I tell people in an interview, when they interview with me, I say 80% is joy, but 20% of the features that you're going to work on are just boring and you need to just do them.
That needs to be done.
There is not everything is green here. And the frustration is stuff like random acts by management that increases frustration, but also tedious deployments, a lot of boilerplate, bad code, high technical debt, all of that stuff that also increases the frustration level. And then if you can even feel some joy, but if frustration is higher, your motivation is zero.
So as a manager, it's easy to see that you have control over some of these things, right? Like
Yeah.
the joy part of it, you have some control at least of like what kind of work that you're giving them. Do they like doing the work? Right? You have some control over that. Frustration, you may have some control of it. You may be the source of a lot of the frustration. My question for you though is the discipline one here. How much do you think as a manager you can look at somebody and say they have a lot of discipline, they don't have a lot of discipline? Is there much you can do about that one? What do you think of that one?
I don't think you can do a lot about that one. My discipline level is here. The discipline level of my wife is here. People are different. But I was able over the years to increase my discipline level because it just needs to, as a professional, you need to just show the level of discipline and do the stuff that needs to be done, even if you don't like to. And this is what I think developers need to work on. The part of the manager would be to show them how these things are related to each other and how if a developer has not the right discipline level for themselves, the self-discipline to power through things that they do not enjoy, that will block their career, you know. So that's what I would do as a manager, but they need to increase the discipline level by themselves. It's a tough thing. You know, it's just like, okay, let's run 5 kilometers every morning. That's a discipline thing. It's tough, you know, for a lot of people. But you need to, especially if you get older, you need to do things because they need to.
There's another component to this that we talk a lot about internally at Full Skill that plays into this ownership. And in some ways, I think it plays into discipline a little bit. And it's what we refer to as courage. One of the problems we see a lot with developers is they don't have the courage to speak up, to ask the questions. They don't have the courage to put themselves out there and worry about criticism.
Yeah.
They don't have the courage to step up and lead. They don't have the courage to take ownership. What do you think of that?
I'm as a manager, I take every trick I can. I think engineering management is a hard thing. And so I take every trick I see, and I think that helps. I saw a trick, I call it a trick, but at one time I reported to the CEO of eBay Germany. And he always said in the meeting, said something, and at the end of the meeting, what he said, does that make sense? So he was encouraging everyone for feedback all the time. Like he said something, we should do this and this, and then he said, does it make sense? Or in the one-on-one, he said something, and then he said, does it make sense? So that's something I copied, and that's something I also did as a manager. I asked, if I say something in a meeting, I say in the end, does this make sense? To encourage everyone to speak up.
Right.
And I tuned this a little bit and made it and ask everyone, and as always, if I'm wrong, tell me. You know, I might be wrong. Tell me if I'm wrong. So that's what I also added everywhere. To the point when I left the company, one developer told me, she said, the one thing I remember is you asking all the time, am I wrong? And tell me so. And so I feel you really need to push people to speak up. They see other people say, Stefan, you're wrong. Like I say, am I wrong here? Does it make sense? Someone says, no, Stefan, that doesn't make sense. And people see this, that there is no retaliation or there is no bad effect from me. And I said, because I said, no, I think I might be right. Or I say, yeah, there might be something, let's look into it or something. And people see this, and then the next time I say, does it make sense? A junior development might say, Stefan, to me, it does not make sense. Something. And really push for feedback and for this culture of people speaking up. That's at least how I see it.
Yeah. Courage is a big one that we internally train with our employees. Is like you've got to be willing to ask the questions. You got to be willing to speak up and collaborate is really important, because you're never going to be able to take ownership of anything if you're not good at collaboration, communication, and having the courage to do it.
Yes.
You got to be able to speak up. So, all right, we've talked a lot about ownership. I think there's been some great conversation here. Let's talk more about holding people accountable for their work and timelines.
Yeah.
I had another startup founder called me a couple days ago, and this was his frustration. He's like, Matt, my CTO I'm very frustrated. He said it was going to take 10 weeks to do this project. Now we're at the end of it, and he says it's going to take another 3 weeks, and then that went by, and it was another 3 weeks, and then all of a sudden it was 6 weeks. I'm like, it actually sounds like you're perfectly on schedule. It's like, however much time you planned, it's really going to take like twice that amount of time. Like, that's actually the plan. But that's really frustrating for everybody involved.
Yes.
Like, but I guess my first question, is that just the nature of this, Stephen? Like, no matter what we do, like, it's always going to take twice as long? Or is there a better way?
If you do things that you haven't done before, it will probably take longer than you thought. You know, if I'm doing something like, if I cook pasta, I know how long it takes. If it's the first time I cook baked CT, I don't know how long it takes. So that's I think in the nature of what you're doing. It might take longer than you expected because you haven't done it before. But
How long would it take you to make homemade German sausage?
I'm sorry, I'm a vegetarian. I don't. For some years
So it
now.
would be really hard for you to know.
But it would be really, really hard for me. But yeah, but I don't know. But that's a good question because I don't know. And what you're asking from the CTO is often make some sausages, and the team never made sausages. So, and then they read on the internet how long it takes, and then there is a trick. I really like to cook. I feel for some stuff like boiled onions or fried onions, it always takes twice the time compared to the recipe. I don't know. For some stuff, the recipe is always wrong. Same for risotto. It's always wrong. So sometimes, perhaps that's with the CTO too. I would tell the CEO, get a coach. The CTO should get a coach. I made the mistake. A particular thing I think is when I was younger as an engineering manager, I made the mistake of giving in to pressure. You know, so I talked to the developers. They estimated 2 weeks. I know developers are overconfident. They are. So I made it 3 weeks. And also because software estimation is fractal. I made it 3 weeks. Then there got a lot of pressure, and I made it 1.5 weeks. You know, the end result obviously was it took 4 weeks, and I got into a lot of trouble. Learning this as an engineering manager, I pushed for the 3 weeks. At some time, and I was not giving in because the conflict that I wanted to avoid was coming back when we didn't deliver on time. So, you know, I felt I need to give into the conflict when I got pressure. I didn't want to fight or something. And so I was convinced to make it 1.5 weeks. But the conflict that I wanted to avoid just came back when we didn't deliver on the 1.5 weeks. So it's just like postponed. The conflict was just postponed. I was just postponing the conflict into the future. And it was it was worse than if I would just stood up and say, no, it's 3 weeks. It is what it is. And if you think it should be done in 2 weeks, you need to probably get another CTO, because as a professional, I think take 3 weeks done, you know, so that's, but it took me several years to arrive at that point.
Well, I always look at it, it's like managing expectations, right? You know, a good example of this, when I ask my wife how long is it going to take her to get ready before we go to dinner, she says 5 minutes.
Yeah.
And I know it's not 5 minutes.
Yeah.
Just tell me it's going to be 45 minutes.
Yeah.
And make it 45 minutes, and I'm good. Just don't lie to me, right? Don't lie to me and tell me it's going to be 5 minutes.
Don't give in to wishful thinking.
And to your point, your example, right? It's like, I should be able to tell you it's 2 weeks, it's 3 weeks, it's 4 weeks. And again, then it gets back to accountability. Like, I told you it was going to take 3 weeks. I told you it was going to take 4 weeks. If it ends up taking more than 4 weeks, then you can hang me later because I was wrong. Like, I was the one who came up with this time frame. It's not some arbitrary time frame that somebody else came up with. I'm the one that owns the fact that I said it would take this amount of time to do, right? And I think, you know, back to the example with my wife, it's like, if it's going to take 45 minutes, just tell me. Like, that I can plan. I can go for a walk. I can go do this. I can go do this. It's fine. Like, I'm not even mad it's going to take 45 minutes. What makes me really mad is when you tell me it takes 5 minutes and it doesn't. And then I sit here for 40 minutes staring at you in frustration, right? Like at the end of the day, we all just want like just manage the expectation. Like even if it's bad news, just tell me. So we just all know instead of lying. And then I get more mad later because I find out you just like lied about it later.
Yeah. And then coming, but assuming estimation work and stuff, holding developers accountable to their commitments. So they say it takes 2 weeks. I say really
everything
sure,
takes 2 weeks,
difficult.
by the way.
Yeah.
When my wife says she's getting ready, I think 2 weeks.
Yeah, because it's not annoying because it's not saying I say 5 weeks that people would say, what, 5 weeks? But in 1 week would be something like people can kind of understand that's not going to happen in 1 week because it's like, so 2 weeks is a nice thing in between. But you need to hold developers accountable, and that's I feel where a lot of engineering managers fail, and they let it slip and slip and slip, and then you have this deviation spiral where you deviate from being on time, finishing the project on time, and it gets worse and worse and worse because developers, engineering managers do not hold developers accountable. Because they fear conflict, or they like introverts, or they want to have a nice working environment, and they feel if I be too bossy, then it's no longer nice. And so there are a lot of stuff that's going on, but I feel the situation is just going worse and worse and worse. And you can be nice. That is, I think, the biggest mistake engineering managers make, developer managers make. They think if they are direct, they are not nice. But I feel you can be nice and polite and direct and keep people accountable. You don't need to be a bad person if you're
be
holding
professional
people accountable
about all of it.
You know.
Well, I think there's, so when my friend called me about the 10-week example I gave earlier, I talked to him. I'm like, look, there could be a few different issues. It's like, are you constantly changing priorities? Do you not have very good like detailed requirements? You don't even really know what needed to be done. Back to your point earlier about asking you to make sausage, and like I don't even eat sausage. I don't know where we start. I think the changing priorities problem one probably kills a lot of different projects, but the other one I think is the understanding the full scope of what really needs to be done and kind of the definition of done, right? Like, and that's one of the things as a CTO you need to know. It's not just about, oh, we wrote the code. It's about, oh, did we test it? Did we train everybody in the company? We trained the sales team. We did the documentation. We know how to ship it to production. We actually shipped to production, and now it's live. Like, it's like, oh, maybe it took 3 weeks to write the code, but it took another 2 or 3 weeks to train everybody, get it to production, like all this stuff. Yeah. And as a CTO, you may be thinking in your head, like, oh, how long would it take me to write the code? And you might be like, oh, it'll take 3 weeks. Yeah. But then there's all these other things you have to do. And as a CTO, and as a business owner of a software company, everybody's got to realize, like, there's a lot of other things that go into the making of this that you have to account for the time.
Yeah, I totally agree. I said before, I take all the tricks I can get to make my job working. One trick is I introduced the concept of done. So when everyone says, I'm done, I say, you're done, which means I don't need to do anything. There is nothing I need to do on this. That means done. Because they say, in Scrum, they say, I'm done, but I haven't written the test. I haven't written the documentation. I haven't talked to DevOps. I haven't talked to customer service for the upcoming changes. I haven't done this and this and this. And done means nothing needs to be done anymore. It's done. And first people laugh, the developers laugh and find this is kind of funny. Stefan being kind of funny again. But this, if I push this concept, it becomes second nature for people to say done, and I'm done, or people asking, are you done, and then they say, yeah, I'm done, and then that really helps to make people finish up, because it's also, this ties a little bit into accountable, because people might say I'm done, and then they push more and more stuff into the not done things, to make the deadline. But the not done things, the amount of things increases. Like, I'm done because I made the deadline, but there are no tests. There's no documentation. There's no Terraform script. There is no, all of that stuff. And I don't accept that. I hold people accountable. I don't accept that.
But I think
done means you don't need to do anything on that.
But I think that's where ownership plays into this, right? Where if you have a team and everybody really has ownership of what it is that they're doing, that it's not just about did you do your part, it's about did you see this through all the way, right? It's like it's not that you owned just writing the code. You owned like this feature. And it's your job to ensure not only did you write the code, but it got tested. Who do we tell on the support team that, hey, this is going to fix 37 bugs from customers. This is the training we need to do, the documentation we need to do, the product marketing we need to do. Not that you're going to do all these things, but it's like you have to be thinking about all these things, right? If I own this thing, it's like it's not done until like all these other things have been done that kind of relate to it.
Yeah.
It's a much bigger picture.
Yeah. Yeah. Yes. That's what ownership means. That is.
If you're really, really, really taking, if you're owner of it,
yes.
It's not done until like all these things get done. Well, I think this has been a great conversation today about ownership with developers and accountability. And at the end of the day, what we're doing is not easy. It's not like, hey, we're boiling macaroni today and we do that every day and we know it takes 5 minutes or whatever. It's more like we're cooking something we've never cooked before that we don't know how to cook. Like that is actually, I think, a good description of it. You have any final tips for how to hold developers accountable? Any other words of wisdom for us?
Final trick, have a mode A and a mode B. Mode A is where you operate 90%. Mode B is where you really need to be clear to the person that they need to deliver the stuff or they are out. And then sometimes that helps mentally with engineering managers that they say, oh, I'm in mode A all the time. But then I switch. I'm a different person. I can switch to mode B and say, you need to do this or otherwise we don't have a future together.
That was a good tip. Good tip. All right, well, everybody, this was Steven Schmidt, the CTO coach. If you're an engineering manager, CTO, and you need a coach, Steven could be your guy. And author of Amazing CTO, great book to check out. Steven, anything else to add to that? All right. Well, thank you so much for being on the show again.
Great conversation.
Thank you, sir.